All right, we've talked about vessels that hold the wine, and we've talked about how to open up those vessels. We've even done now the sniff and swirl. We've gotten into the drinking game. We're walking the walk. Now let's do a section on actually some general FAQs that I've gotten over the last decade and a half. Frequently asked questions about the vessels that hold the wine, as well as decanting, as well as wine serving order, and even restaurant etiquette. We'll tackle a slew of commonly asked questions starting right now with the vessels that hold the wine. There's a whole bunch of different glasses. In fact, this is just a handful of an infinite number of sized and shaped glasses you can get for wine consumption. Let me give you some general tips. First off, a lot of students ask me immediately, is there anything to it? Does it matter? Because you know what? I've even traveled in Europe and in small villages in Italy. There's old guys sitting around drinking really good Italian wine out of jelly jars or out of mason jars. You can drink out of any vessel you want, and I actually will never poo-poo you for your choice of drinking vessel. However, there is something to a really nice glass, and it can really affect and upgrade the aromas, smells, flavors, and experience of the wine. There truly is something to it. So when looking at some of these glasses, and I'm giving you again just a handful of the general shapes that you'll come across pretty much anywhere in a restaurant, wine shop, or otherwise, you'll see commonalities, common expressions. And I'm going to start with a very general white wine glass. In fact, I'll go ahead and pick up a general red wine glass as well. The thing I'll point out immediately is that the white wine glass is typically smaller, kind of same bowl shape, but smaller than a standard typical red wine glass. There's reasons for that. The reason being that white wine is typically served chilled. We'll get to that in a minute. And therefore, you don't want to have a really big glass of white wine, because then if you fill it up halfway, by the time you have swirled and sniffed your way through it in dinner conversation, and maybe a half hour later, and you still have wine in your glass that's now raised up in temperature. So white wine glasses, typically smaller. But the bowl shape, again, is what to focus on. Most wine glasses will have this bowl shape that gets tapered and smaller up at the opening, and that's for the reasons that we talked about in the Sniff and Swirl lecture. And that is, you want to focus those wine molecules. So all wine glasses, or most wine glasses, will have this general shape in an effort to focus the smells up where you're going to put your nose. So general white, general red. But you can actually have a variety of different red wine glasses. And there's some variety in whites, but there's more in reds. This is just kind of the two biggies. We would call what I've now already called a standard red wine glass, this is really a Bordeaux shape. And you might, if you go to purchase them, they'll usually be called Bordeaux glasses. I don't know why it is. I don't know the tradition. It doesn't matter. That general wine glass shape is its typical Bordeaux. But look at this one. It's kind of shorter and fatter. It's more of a true bowl, almost a fishbowl shape. And that's a standard Burgundy shape. Burgundy has a bigger bowl, a wider base, and for reasons which may or may not be scientifically 100% true, this is because many Burgundy wines, and if you don't know this already, red Burgundy is Pinot Noir, but many red Burgundies, as many old world red wines, can be extremely complex, extremely layered. So this bigger bowl actually gives a wider surface area of the wine and a bigger area to swirl it around in, therefore, hopefully, expressing more of the depth and character and complexity of the wine. Again, this is a general definitions, may or may not have any scientific backing. So, general white, a Burgundy shape, and a Bordeaux shaped glass. Again, there's infinite varieties of these in sizes. This is just the generals. Now, there are some other distinct shapes you should know about. One being the champagne flute, or the flute period. Because you can have sparkling wine that's not necessarily champagne. We all recognize this is a champagne flute. Why is it not focusing the aromas and flavors? Why is it not bowled out like the other shapes? Because the primary function of serving in this particular shaped glass is it's visual. Sparkling wine's pretty bubbles. And so in a long, tall glass like this, it accentuates the lines of bubbles that will stream up as you have it in front of you. And by the way, typically champagne is served in this flute very high up so that you visually see long streams of bubbles, and it's visually appealing. When you have most other wine glasses, you'll typically only pour 2 to 3 ounces, or depending on the glass size, maybe just a little under halfway to the top. But you actually never really want to pour all the way to the top of a glass of red or white wine. Why would that be? Because we want to do the swirl, baby, and we want to sniff. And if it's filled up to the top, you can imagine trying to swirl something that has no room for swirl. So again, I'm working in general serving tips already, talking about glassware. Champagne, mostly visual, usually poured to the top, looks pretty. Wee, bubbles. I'm only going to show you one other distinct kind of glass, and that is a tulip that has a flared lip. Again, I don't have a great scientific explanation why this is, but this is a typical cordial glass or a sherry glass. It must accentuate the nose somehow. I don't know how it is, but if you see that glass, it's typically for a cordial, a pre-dinner liqueur, or even a post-dinner liqueur. Some people just serve dessert wines in this shaped glass, but this is kind of a standard sherry glass. And one other that I'll throw in, by the way, the standard port glass is kind of shaped like this, but gigantic. Kind of a brandy snifter, even more bigger bowl to swirl around more. That would be a standard big port glass. One other glass variation I'll show you is kind of new, and it's stemless. Is there anything wrong with this? Is it goofy? Only in that it's not traditional. And you look at it and you're like, that's kind of strange. What's the benefit of a stemless? See? Look at the shape. Oh, Bordeaux shape. What's the advantages of a stemless versus a stemmed regular wine glass? Well, these things are a lot hardier. They don't break as easy, for sure. And they're less likely to tip over. Sets right down, boom, doesn't go anywhere. What are the drawbacks? Well, actually, one of the other benefits with red wine is that you actually have, by default, surface contact with your hands. So you're doing the warming pretty much all the time in a stemless glass. What are perhaps some of the detracting points of a stemless glass? Well, we already pointed out with white wine glasses are typically smaller, and you typically hold them like this because you don't want your hand coming in contact with the bowl. You don't want to warm up your white wine or even your champagne. Anything that's chilled down, you don't want to warm it up. So that's why we hold white wine glasses like this, and you don't have that option with a stemless. So stemless, good for some things, catching on. They're actually getting quite popular in today's world. I have no real problem with them. I don't typically drink a lot of white wines with them and wouldn't suggest that you do either. Now, again, that's general glassware tips. Let me give you a few more pointers as well. I don't know why this is, I just know it works, and I'll ask people in the store to chime in on this. I don't think you need to go out and spend $1 million buying fine crystal. In fact, I've never really enjoyed that kind of clunky, chunky crystal type stuff. But I will tell you this, friends. Look for the thinnest type glass that you can find. Any backup on that?
Absolutely.
Something about it, and by the way, price usually dictates this. A real thick, chunky glass is usually cheap. And it can even look just like this visually. When you pick it up, it's twice as heavy and twice as thick. The thinner the glass, for some reason, it helps accentuate the flavor more. It's not as distracting when you go to drink it. I do not know why it is, but the thinner the glass, somehow the better the wine. And again, I'm not trying to make people spend money, but if you're going to spend money in wine and you think you're going to really get into wine and start drinking more and more expensive wines, by all means, go ahead and drop the dime and get a nice set of glassware, well-produced glassware. A couple of brands I would recognize or point out in particular are Riedel. And who else do you guys like? Spiegel. Spiegel who?
Spiegelau.
Spiegelau?
Spiegelau.
Spiegelau. Both German?
Riedel's Austrian.
Austria, German. For some reason, they're good with the glassware in that part of the world. Look into it. It's always a great gift as well to yourself, but also to family and friends who are getting into wine. And again, try this experiment at home. Get a chunky, crappy glass, thick glass, and a really nice glass, and try them side by side. I've actually done it, and it does taste better in a better glass. No explanation, and I have zero snob factor, by the way. If you told me that the thin glass only cost a nickel and that the thick glass cost $100, I'd be unaffected. I'd be like, nope, it tastes better. It's cleaner. It's more vibrant in the thinner glass. Also, the last tip I would give is shop at Goodwills and thrift stores. You'd be amazed how many nice glasses you can accidentally bump into for pennies on the dollar at a Goodwill. They have lots of bad glasses as well, but if you're just getting into this, don't go drop $1 million on glassware and decanters. Go shop around at thrift stores and pick up other people's glasses that they spent hundreds of dollars on. You can do it if you're an effective shopper. Okay, that's some general guidelines about glassware itself. And yes, it does make a difference. Serving temps also make a slight difference, although I'm not as married to this knowledge as some are. And what I mean by this is I'm a big advocate of you figuring out what you like. If you like white wines, warm or hot, and you like the flavor of that, then that's what you should do. If you like red wines really cold, then that's what you should do. Don't be dead set on rules that other people have made. Having said that, there are some traditional ways to do things that do help accentuate the flavors the best. In general, as is everything I'm saying, the wines you want to serve the chillest, chill, are light, dry white wines, rosés, and for sure, sparkling wines. Those should be pretty chilled out, 40 to 50 degrees. And again, I'm not pulling out thermometers. I'm not that much of a wine snob and never will be. But it is for acidic, crisp white wines, floral white wines, and sparkling, bubbling wines. They're just so much more refreshing and awesome, and it brings out the flavor of them to be chilled all the way down. How do you get to 40 or 50 degrees? Well, you can check your refrigerator settings, but I typically say for that category of wine, 1 to 2 hours in the fridge. Push it for 3 or 4 if you like. You don't have to freeze it overnight or anything, but a few hours in the fridge will get your sparkling and light white wines and rosés where you want them at. Next category up is full white wines and lighter reds. Light. Beaujolais style reds, like light and fruity reds. I like a little bit of a chill on those as well, but not hardcore, so maybe 50 to 60 degrees. So maybe in the fridge for a half hour to an hour. Tops. Doesn't take anything more fancy than that. Oh, by the way, if you want to get to 40 to 50 degrees for the other wines I just talked about, like sparkling wine, there's always ice. A bucket of ice. Put the wine right down there on the ice for, up to an hour. That should be good to go. It'll be at 40 to 50 degrees. But this 50 to 60 degrees, slightly chilled, 20 minutes, half hour for most white wines, and light fruity red wines. An hour really tops in the fridge. And that leaves our big reds, full-bodied reds, and most dessert wines, definitely ports, are kind of the ones you want to serve the warmest. But not necessarily hot. That would be in the 60 to 65 range. And that would be somewhere between the temperature of your basement and the temperature of your living room. And yeah, that's what makes it tricky. So if you have stuff in your basement, that's supposedly just slightly too cold, but your living room is just slightly too warm. So figure it out. You want to bring them up maybe an hour or two in advance, maybe 3 or 4 hours in advance, to get them near room temperature, but not all the way. Because do keep in mind, when you pour the red wine into your glass, the glass itself, unless you have it chilled, is warm, is at room temperature, so that's going to elevate the temperature of the wine slightly. And when you put your hands on it, that's also going to elevate the temperature of the wine slightly. So even full-bodied reds and ports can be just slightly below room temperature. That makes sense? Again, let me re-stress, there's no hard and fast rules. Don't pull out thermometers, because then you're just way too geeking out about this. We want to drink this stuff, so get in there and do it. Now, why would we have this variation in temps? As I've already suggested, you bring out, when you chill wines, you bring out some of their floral, you accentuate their fruity, floral, acidic, edgy characteristics that we want. That's good. If they're too warm, they appear flabby. And again, you can try this at home. Try a hot acidic Chardonnay and a chilled acidic Chardonnay, and you will immediately be like, oh, yes, this one, I like this one. This one's a little flabby. The opposite is true with reds. If you serve them too chilled, you put a big full-bodied red wine in the fridge overnight, and then pull it out and serve it, you're chilling it actually buries too many of the flavors. So it won't be as open, it won't be expressing enough, and it'll seem a little off balance as opposed to a red wine that's closer to room temperature. Honestly, again, to show my personal preference, I like the red wines at room temperature. I really don't dally with trying to get them slightly below or pulling them up from my basement. No, I kind of like the reds, big reds, a little warmer because they're expressing themselves. They're more vitalized, and they are. You get more of the complexity. If it's cold, you're going to bury the complexity that's within that glass of red wine. Okay, glassware, serving temps, serving order. This one is frizzle. This is not up for much speculation. You can radically affect the taste of the wines depending on what order you serve them in if you're doing more than one wine. If you're just opening up a bottle for dinner, you don't have to worry about this stuff. You're having that one wine, you're having that nice Chianti with a bowl of spaghetti. Bueno, bueno, all right? But if you are doing a tasting where you're going to have 2, 3, or 4 wines with a single dinner, okay, with multiple dishes, or when you go into the wine store, or if you're at a restaurant, you're going to order a certain wine with every single course that you go with. Here is some general considerations that will definitely accentuate or detract from your wine experience. In no general order, and I'll take any shout-outs from the peanut gallery on this. Generally speaking, you want to serve whites before reds. That seems like it makes sense. Pretty standard. I think everybody agrees with that. And that's because, again, whites typically are more delicate, usually more floral, usually more fruity. Usually. And if you do a huge, big, tannic red wine first, it's going to throw off that delicate, fruity wine if you have it afterwards. So you can see where the order starts to affect things very radically in the way that you'll taste and perceive the wine. That white wine might be extremely delicate, and when you have it first, it's like, oh, it's really good. If you had it after a big, bold, Bordeaux, you won't taste anything in that white wine. It's going to be, your palate will actually be exhausted and played out. So generally speaking, whites before reds. Also generally speaking, young before old. And that actually seems a little counterintuitive because young wines, especially if we're talking young reds before old reds, young reds can be aggressive, maybe a lot fruit forward, maybe a lot of tannic forward, but older wines are more complex. And so basically you want more simplistic wines before more complex wines. So younger wines before older wines. And here's where it gets perhaps the most crucial. Dry wines before sweet. You want to go dry before sweet. And this is where it can easily be detected and become very obvious that you're screwing up your own palate if you reverse that order. What I mean by that is if I have a really, really sweet wine here, we're going to talk about what sweet versus dry is in the next lecture, but if I have a really sweet wine here and a really dry wine here, if I try the dry one first, be like, oh, got it, acidic, fruity, floral, whatever, and then I try the sweet one, oh, okay, this one's way bolder in terms of the finish, in terms of the sweetness level, and perhaps the complexity, and I can respect it. But if I reverse that, if I try the sweet one first, sweet, something about sugar really overwhelms your palate. It will coat everything, it's in there, and when you go to do a dry wine after a sweet wine, the dry wine will seem wildly dry. It will be over the top, tart, and not a pleasant experience. That's why you always want to do dry wines before you go to sweet. So actually, I do need to put in this caveat. There are a couple of other things to consider here. If you're at a tasting and you see they're having like 10 wines at the tasting, they'll do white wines before red, almost always, and dry before sweet. But if you have a semi-sweet white, you'll see that they'll serve a 2 or 3 white wines. Then they'll put in the semi-sweet white at the end of the white wine flight before you then move to your simple reds to more complex and older reds. That makes sense? So all these rules kind of intermarry with each other depending upon the variety of wines that are in front of you. Cool? All right. Any comments from the peanut gallery on serving order? I think that pretty much covers serving order.
First?
I did. What's that?
Did you bubblies first?
Oh, thank you. And there is also one other thing to consider, and that is with sparkling wines, bubblies, back to our champagnes, they can almost invariably always go first. Really, they can go anywhere. But Sparkling wines are often served as an aperitif before the dinner even starts because they're so wonderfully palate cleansing. There's something about the bubbles, and usually they have an acidic backbone that really just cleans everything out. And so those can really go first in any circumstance for any flight of wines. They're really good. All right, cool. Now let's talk about, for just a moment or two, what to expect when serving or ordering wine at a restaurant. And I never would have thought to even approach this in an introductory class, but it comes up in the FAQ all the time. And people say, well, I'm going to this fancy restaurant. What can I expect? What should I do? Because I'm really intimidated when I go to order wine. And you're right. If you go to a restaurant that brings out a phone book for a wine list, I'm even still to this day, I'm like, oh God, I'm not looking at that. I'm here to eat, all right, not read. So they can be intimidating even for people that are confident and experienced with wine. Here are some general tips of how to order wine at a restaurant and what to expect, and some things that you should demand, okay? Depending upon your level of experience and knowledge, and it's a decent-sized wine list, you can poke through it. And again, depending on your skill, you should be confident enough to try stuff, but always look at what you think you're going to order for food first. You can always order a bubbly up front. You're never going to go wrong there. You can always order a light wine up front as an aperitif. You're never going to go wrong there. But you really want to already start thinking about food and wine pairing, because that's where the magic really happens. So think first about your meal before you order a bottle for sure, but even if you're going to order a glass of something expensive, think about your meal first. What are you going to eat? And then start putting two and two together to think what will go good with that. Now, if your confidence level and experience level is not at the point that you're like, I'm looking at this phone book and I still don't know what's going on, I don't recognize half the names, that's cool. That's cool. That's what the waiter, waitress, or sommelier is there for. And the sommelier is the fancy guy who gets paid supposedly a lot of money to know everything about wine. You should always feel confident enough, because you're paying the bills for these people, to ask for advice. They should be willing to give you advice. But here's a tip or two on how to ask for advice. Don't ever do this. Waiter, what should I drink? No. Again, you've not provided them with any information of what you like. How the hell are they supposed to know what you should be drinking? They don't know what you like. They don't know what you've ordered for the meal. They don't know how much money you want to spend. So before you ask a simple question like, tell me what to do, or tell me what to drink, or even what do you like, don't ever ask that either. Because again, that's not related to your experience, your palate, and your meal. Ask questions like this. Okay, I'd like to spend about this much money, and I kind of like fruity red wines, or I kind of like light white wines, or I kind of like, give them something to work with. And again, price pointing is awesome. It's not always the most etiquette-filled thing to do, to be talking about numbers and perhaps in front of the date you're trying to impress, but you can point to the menu and say, I'd like to spend about this much on a bottle. I'd like to spend about this much on a glass, and here are the wines that I like. What do you recommend? That is perfectly reasonable, perfectly logical, and you have put them in the ballpark for them to understand exactly what you need. And that's what they really want to do. Cool? Okay. Other things with restaurant etiquette. By the way, you never tell a waiter, just bring me what you want, because they'll bring you the biggest, most expensive thing they have, because they're going to get tipped on that. And again, they don't know what you're ordering for dinner. Tip number 2 is go with the food first. You should decide your food. Don't ever ask the waiter what you should be eating either. People do that all the time, and I'm amazed. Hey, what should I eat? Oh, really, this? Oh, I'm allergic to that. Well, of course. How's the waiter supposed to know that? So the second way you can approach asking for help in a wine place is to go with the food that you want to eat, and that makes it easy for the waiter or waitress or sommelier, and say, oh, I really want this steak and blue cheese dish. What would you recommend I pair with that? I mean, that makes it easy for them. On the spot, they'll say, gotcha, all right? So that's the way that you get into the game at restaurants. Also, be prepared that if you're going to order by the bottle, or even by the glass, in a fancy restaurant that knows about wine, you're probably going to pay 200 to 300% more than that bottle will cost you at a wine store. Okay? They're charging for the service they're giving you. They're charging for storing that wine and making it available to you, and they're also charging you for the glassware. There's something in today's world that's increasing in popularity called bottle fee. Is that what we call it? Corkage fee? Where you can bring your own bottle. Because so many more Americans are getting into wine, more and more restaurants are saying, well, okay, we'll just charge you 10 or 20 bucks to bring your own bottle, and then we'll just charge you to use our glasses and to pull the cork and do all the fancy stuff. Again, some restaurants that are really into wine, they're not going to allow that because they make a lot of money on the wine part. But more and more, kind of regular standard restaurants and even, a couple steps above to a decent restaurant are allowing corkage fees because it's just money to them. They'll charge 20 bucks just to pull a cork for you. Yeah, they can do that. So if you have a good collection and you want to save money when you go out to dinner, call ahead to see if they do a corkage fee. Okay? If you're going to go ahead and order the bottle there at the restaurant and pay the 100 to 200 to 300% markup, which is fine. I do it all the time. Sometimes I just don't care. I just want something nice, and I want them to be wines that they know about that they can pair with the food. Several things will happen that I usually kind of make fun of. And there are several other things that happen that you should make sure happen or you should demand it. And that is that when you select a wine, let's say by the bottle. If it's by the glass, typically we'll just bring you the glass or bring out a glass and pour it for you so you can see that it's coming from the bottle that you wanted. If you order by the bottle, they should, especially if it's a bottle more than 50, 60, or certainly over 100 bucks. Here's what should happen when you order what I consider an expensive bottle. They should bring it to you. They should bring you the bottle unopened and have you take a look at it. Every decent restaurant that knows about wine that I have ever been to, they get that. It's kind of a verification that they're not getting ready to open up the wrong bottle, but also a good restaurant wants you to know this is the bottle you ordered. We're not pouring some rot gut stuff from 3 weeks ago into a empty bottle and giving it to you. So you should expect that they will bring you the bottle to check out, and you nod politely. I mean, you recognize that that's the bottle, and you nod politely. I always kind of feel weird about that. Like, why, yes, that is exactly what I asked for. Verification, approved. Then, again, most good restaurants will go ahead and do the whole process of opening the cork, peeling it back, perhaps, and pulling the cork in front of you, again, as verification that this is actually the bottle that you ordered. We've opened it now in front of you. And then, very good restaurants for expensive bottles of wine will ask, would you like this decanted? Ha ha ha.
First, they will give you the cork.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I meant to make fun of. After they pull the cork, they might give it to you. Usually on a little plate, little tea plate, they'll hand it to you. And if you want to play the game and look like you're intelligent or semi-intelligent, then obviously you pick up the cork and mull it over and do one of these. Yes. Yeah, fully approve. This is all nonsense to me. I think it's totally nonsense because this is a cork. And sniffing a cork, you know what it'll smell like? A cork! That's what, if you want verification, this is a cork and it smells like a cork, I guess sniff it. I don't sniff things in public outside of the wine itself, though, all right? General rule to self. Don't sniff in public. So the only thing I can think of that this started with a tradition of that you would like to inspect the cork to make sure that it's not rotten or moldy or damaged. But here's the deal. I've pulled out corks that are rotten, moldy, and damaged, and the wine is fine. So I just don't hold a lot of stock in the cork inspection part, and certainly the sniffing of the cork, which you see in every fancy schmancy movie and at country clubs and stuff. I find it hilariously comical. And so I do it almost to mock it. I'm like, oh, no, send this back. And usually that gets a laugh out of the waiter. I'm like, no, pour me the damn wine. All right? Then, did you want to add something to that? Okay. Then we'll get to this whole concept of a decanting. And that's where we're going to end this section of our wine lecture, because there is something to decanting as well. And there are lots of different ways to decant. In a nice restaurant or at your own home, if you get into wine and really want to go the whole 9 yards, you might want to go ahead and purchase something like this. It's called a decanter. It's basically just a big-ass jar. They're shaped a million different ways. Some of them like duck, some of them with crazy tubing anymore. I've seen great variations, but this is kind of a standard decanter. Now, what you're going to do with this is pour the wine into it. And we're going to pour the wine into it because, particularly with big wines, that may be still a little young, you actually want them to go ahead and open up, what we call opening up. You want a little oxygen introduced into the wine because it helps accelerate the aging process, quite frankly, and it starts to express itself more. And this can actually happen very quickly. So a wine that may be a little tight, maybe a little too young is what we call it, maybe a little closed, if you open it up and slosh it around in some oxygen and then leave it sit for an hour or two, it will then start to express itself much more. In general, you don't want oxygen getting into your wine if you're storing it because that's what can make it go bad. And also, once you open this wine, if you let it sit on your counter overnight without closing it, oxygen's getting in there and bacteria will grow and it will go bad. It turns into vinegar. So as a general rule, we don't want oxygen in our wine. But if we're ready to drink it, yeah, let's jam some in there. Because one of the other things we're doing with this whole process is the same. We're swirling it to get an oxygen in there, mixing around again to help it express itself as much as possible. Again, we can do that in advance with a big ass glass, a big ass decanter. And what we're doing, and I'm going to pour some in just generally. There's several ways to do it. Randall, you can come around the counter and throw in tips if you like. I'm going to pour in a little just to show you. So you can just pour in like this. You can tilt if you like. You should be pouring kind of slow and maybe on the lip, because another reason we decant, and this is more for older wines than younger ones, is that sediment can build up. Stuff can fall out of solution while you're aging it. And so as you're pouring, you want the bottle to have sat still for a while so all the stuff's at the bottom. And then as you slowly pour, all the stuff's just staying down here, and you get to a point where if you see the junk getting ready to go into the neck and go out, then you can stop and back off of it. Now, I wanted to stop at this point just to show you what's going on down here is we've wildly increased the surface area of the wine. So now more oxygen can get to more of the wine. And just compare. With this open bottle, there's exactly that much surface area on top of this wine that oxygen can get to. In this decanter, there's this much. There's this huge pancake of surface area that oxygen can get to. We can even cheat it a little bit, and I do this all the time by shaking it up a little bit. Yeah! When I do that, people think I'm crazy, but look, oxygen's in there. That's kind of what I wanted. So a little swirly swirl in here gets it juiced up, oxygen in it starts to open up. I can leave that there for a couple hours before dinner. Before we get into the rest of the decanting tips, you should also probably think about what is it you're decanting and why. Like I said, with a big young red, and this one kind of counts. This is an 08 or an 09 Chianti Classico, or maybe it's just a Chianti. I really don't know much about this wine, but my instinct is that it's probably closed up. It probably could age for a few years more, but I want to go ahead and drink it tonight. So I want to accentuate it. I want to accelerate the aging. Let's get some oxygen in there and do this. If it's a really, really old wine, and again, I might let this sit for 2 or 3 hours before dinner. A really old wine, you want to decant, because it's visually you want to kind of check out the color, and you want to get some oxygen in there just to start it up, and you want to make sure you get all the sediment and junk out. But you're looking at an hour tops. If it's already an old wine, it's already aged. It's already starting to express itself. And if you leave it sit open for 2, 3, 5, 6 hours, it may start to go downhill very rapidly. So, not all wines have to be decanted, by the way. But I'm a big fan of why not? I'm a huge fan. And I have found that even cheap reds will benefit by an hour or two before dinner, sloshing it around a little bit. Again, older wines I'd be much more careful with, but this is an intro class, so we're not going to be at that point by the time you get through this short course. But you'll learn more. But try this, experiment with it. Get 2 bottles of a $10 wine, decant one for 2 or 3 hours before dinner, and then open one just before dinner and try them side by side. You might be amazed how much more open and expressive and perhaps fruity or whatever that this decanted one is. Got it? Okay. Now, lots of people ask about lots of other devices because there's all these great wine devices. I've now showed you the general way to do a standard decanting into a big jug here. There's also a really cool little thing. What's this even called? Is there a name for it? It actually looks like a cup when you look at it, but this is just a stand for it, right? And it has a great little mesh screen in it. It's beautiful. And it'll sit down right into the top of a decanter, or it'll actually sit down right into the top of another empty bottle you might have. So what we'll see is that it has some pinholes around the bottom of it that if we set it here, then we put the screen in, the screen's going to take care of any of the sediment that gets out, so we don't even have to worry about pouring slow. And then watch as it magically aerates it for us. Oh, look! Oh, can you see that, Katie? It's actually splashing it out like a water hose in multiple directions all across the sides of that decanter, and thus incorporating more and more oxygen even faster into the process. And I can pour it as fast as I want to because, again, the screen is going to catch all the sediment. We don't even have to go slow up there. And it's fun. Woo! Yeah, it's a slip and slide, but for wine. I love it. Now, there's some other devices that are becoming popular as well, and students ask me about this all the time. And I really don't know that much about it, which is why I was defaulting to Randall for some advice, is this contraption. Does anybody have anything to say about this? What is this actually called?
Venturi.
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 Okay? And it is a magical wine ager accelerator as well. So it's basically a decanter straight into the glass.
Yes, straight into the glass. And it does put a lot of oxygen into the wine very efficiently.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, through its own design, it's going to essentially do what we just saw with this, but somehow magically even more, and then it's a straight pour into the glass, so you don't even have to have a big decanted bottle. Let's see what this looks like when we do it. And you hear it. Well, that's just fun too! So whatever it's doing in there, it's super juicing the wine with oxygen on the spot because it was pouring out as fast as I was pouring in, all right? And again, this is a great device. I wouldn't buy it up front, borrow it. Go test it first to see if there's anything to it. But this is great because this gives you the added benefit of you still have your bottle over here that you can pour another glass. And this one's now automatically decanted, supposedly, and you could pour another glass to taste them side by side to see if there's actually any difference. Okay? So, decanting in general, we do it typically with older wines to remove sediment, although sediment doesn't scare me. I'd drink that too, especially if it's a good wine. But it's done mostly to accentuate and accelerate the opening of a wine. We haven't got to this, and we might not even in the short course on wine, but one of the reasons we age wine is they evolve over time. Wine is a quite delightful beverage in that, when liquor's made, liquor's liquor. It's not changing any. When beer's made, it's beer. It's not really going to change any. But wine will continue to evolve in a bottle. And it will, for very well-crafted wines, some of them need to be laid down or rested or stored for 10 or 20 years to actually achieve their full potential. And it's very hard to fake it. You can't just make those flavors. Those are flavors that only come with time. And decanting can actually, again, help accelerate that. Now, I can't make this bottle taste like a 20-year-old bottle simply by decanting, but I can get a little closer. I can help it express itself more, and it'll pick up some of those flavors that I'm hoping to get if I were to store it for 20 years. And again, certainly if it's older wine that you want to decant to get the mess out of it, that's good as well. But final words on this. Experiment with decanting. You don't need to buy $1 million decanter. By all means, you can pour it into a jelly jar. You could pour it from one full bottle into an empty bottle. It's the process. It's not the shape. It's not any special tools. Pour from one thing to the next. 2 empty bottles. Pour them back and forth to add oxygen in, and then just let it sit on the counter before dinner. But experiment with it because I, again, stand by the idea that it actually can make even a cheap wine a little bit better a few hours in advance. But you experiment with it and check it out for yourself. Final note to self. Before you go spending a bunch of money on all these crazy gadgets, or even these beautiful things, and I do think decanters are gorgeous, and they're a delightful way to serve in a full-on setting with a dinner with multiple courses. The last tip I would give is go back to the Goodwill. I already told you that for shopping for glassware for the beginner, but also when you come across these in a thrift store, nobody knows what the hell they are. They think it's a flower vase. You will pick these things, if you see them, you can pick them up for $1 or $2 or $3, when ordinarily they're $30, $40, $50, $100. So, that's just stuff I've learned over the years. That sums it up for, and I think this is the last of our lectures on walking the walk. That is, all of the stuff you need to know, and perhaps even a little bit more than you need to know right this second to actually get drinking, and what are some of the mechanics behind the vessel that the wine comes in, how to open it, and the vessel that you actually serve the wine in, including even decanters. And now we're going to move on to, all right, how do we start talking about this stuff? That's next.